The envelope was the kind that didn't need to announce itself. Cream-colored, heavy stock. The paper alone worth more than the hourly rate of the woman it had been left for. No name on the front. No return address, just the envelope, centered on the counter of the dry goods storage room like it had always been there, like it belonged in a world of industrial shelving and bulk linen spray and the faint smell of the bleach that Mercy used to strip wax from the ballroom floor on alternate Thursdays. She found it at 614A. She picked it up. Felt the weight of it. Set it back down. She knew what it was. She'd been working the overnight shift at the Chongwon Hotel for 14 months, and she'd seen envelopes like this before, left for other staff, after significant events, after the kind of evenings the hotel pretended, in daylight, had not occurred. They were always taken. She had watched 3 separate colleagues pocket them without breaking stride, the transaction so practiced it had become a kind of fluency. A language everyone here spoke except her. She opened it anyway. She was not naive enough to refuse something without first knowing what she was refusing. $40,000 in banded hundreds. She put it back in the envelope. She set the envelope on the counter. She picked up her mop and went back to the ballroom. She did not think about the number, because the number was large enough that thinking about it clearly was something she'd have to do later, when she wasn't at work. When the specific pressure of being in this building wasn't making her chest do the thing it had been doing for 3 weeks. She thought instead about the wax pattern on the northeast corner of the floor, which was uneven in a way that bothered her professionally, and she worked on it. And the morning light came through the tall windows and turned the ballroom gold in the way it did in October when Chicago remembered briefly that it was beautiful before the cold arrived to stay. At 7:30 a.m., when her shift ended, the envelope was still on the counter. She left it there. The thing about the Chongwon Hotel was that it was not a hotel. Not in the way hotels were hotels. Places of transit, of strangers passing through, of loyalty points and continental breakfast, and the specific loneliness of a room where nothing belonged to you. The Chongwon was a fortress disguised as hospitality, a place where the powerful came to conduct business that required the dignity of a certain kind of address, and it had been built for exactly that purpose by Oh Tae-yang 30 years ago, and maintained by his son, Oh Ji-hoon, with the same exacting standard, which was, everything surfaces as luxury. Nothing surfaces at all. Oh Ji-hoon was 37 years old and ran what his father had built with the particular efficiency of a man who had grown up understanding that the building around him was not simply beautiful, it was functional. And the function was the point. And the beauty was what the world was allowed to see. The Chongwon's ballrooms hosted charity galas and corporate dinners and, on specific evenings by private arrangement, the kinds of conversations that moved money and power, and occasionally people in directions that no press release would ever describe. Ji-hoon chaired those evenings the way he chaired everything, with complete, deliberate control. The temperature in every room a thing he managed the way other men manage spreadsheets, precisely, without sentiment, aware that a single degree of error changed outcomes. He had never, in 14 months, noticed the woman who cleaned the ballrooms. This was not unusual. He did not notice the overnight staff as a category. They existed in the building's hours he did not inhabit, moving through spaces he used in daylight, restoring them to the condition they needed to be in before he arrived. They were a function, not a presence. The distinction had never required examination. Until Tuesday morning, when his head of facilities had appeared in his office at 8 a.m., with the expression of a man delivering news he had not been trained for. The envelope, Park So-hyun said. The one left for the overnight crew lead. Taken? No, sir. Ji-hoon had looked up from his desk. Moved? No, sir. Park's hands were very still, which in a man of his composure meant he was managing something. it's still on the counter, exactly where it was left. The silence in Ji-hoon's office had a specific quality to it. Not empty, but thinking. Who's the overnight crew lead? Park had given him a name. Welcome back, my still waters and low-burning flames. If tonight is your first night here, subscribe and hit the bell before this story takes you somewhere you weren't planning to go. Drop your city in the comments right now. Every city you leave tells me this family is still growing, still traveling, still here for these stories. Every like, every comment is how we keep going. Find your stillness. Let's begin. Mercy Adeyemi was not the overnight crew lead by ambition. She was the overnight crew lead because Carolyn, who had been crew lead for 6 years and had trained Mercy in the first 3 months with a thoroughness that communicated real professional pride, had left in August for a position in Denver. And because Mercy had been there long enough and was good enough at the work that the transition had required no announcement, only a slight pay adjustment and a new line on her contractor agreement. She was 34 years old and had come to overnight hotel cleaning the way most people came to overnight hotel cleaning, which was through a sequence of events that had individually seemed manageable and collectively had produced a situation she was now navigating with the tools available. Her tools were considerable. She simply had not been allowed to use most of them in rooms that paid. She had a degree in hotel and hospitality management from a university in Lagos that had never once been a problem until she arrived in Chicago, where it became a problem immediately, in the specific way that qualifications from certain places became invisible in certain rooms regardless of their content. She had spent 2 years applying for positions in hotel management and mid-level operations, and had received, in return, a comprehensive education in which credentials the American hospitality industry was and was not prepared to take seriously. She had stopped applying. She had taken the overnight work because it was immediate and consistent, and the Chongwon paid better than the market rate. And she had told herself it was temporary in the way people told themselves things were temporary when temporary was what they needed to believe to keep going. 14 months later. She was good at the work. She had always been good at the work she did, which was one of the things about herself she had decided not to apologize for in a world that occasionally found it inconvenient. She ran a crew of 6 on a rotating schedule with an efficiency that Park Soo-hyun had noted in writing twice and, in a moment she suspected he had not planned, once simply said aloud, "You run this better than anyone we've had." She had thanked him. She had not said, "I was trained to run departments twice this size." The information would not have helped anything. She knew what the envelope was for. 3 weeks ago, on a Friday night, the Chongwon's East Ballroom had hosted an event that required the overnight crew to be invisible in a different way than usual. Not simply unnoticed, but actively absent from certain corridors at certain times, working in sequenced windows she'd been given by Park at 7 p.m. With no context, she had run her crew through those windows with a precision that had kept everyone working and no one in the wrong place, which she understood afterward had been more structurally important than she'd been told. Something had happened in the East Wing between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. She had heard enough. Tone, not content. Through closed doors she had been told not to open, to understand that it was the kind of something this hotel was built to contain. She had contained it. Her crew had gone home safely. The ballroom had been spotless by 6 a.m. The $40,000 was for that. She understood it as a transaction, and she understood the transaction as a form of purchase, and she had held the envelope in the storage room with the morning light just beginning through the high windows, and she had thought about what it meant to be purchased, even at a price she could not dismiss, and she had set it down. He came to the hotel at 10 a.m. She was still there. A discrepancy in the wax on the ballroom floor that had been bothering her since Tuesday was bothering her more now that she'd had 3 hours of sleep and could think about it clearly, and she'd come back to address it rather than leave it for the next crew. This was not in her job description. It was simply something she was going to do. She was on her knees in the northeast corner with a stripping tool when she heard the ballroom doors open. She did not look up immediately. The doors opened regularly. It was a hotel. Miss Adeyemi. Her name. Not hey or you or the particular nothing that some people used when they were addressing service staff who did not require acknowledgement as individuals. Her full name. Correct pronunciation, and everything, which placed the speaker in a specific and narrow category. She looked up. O.G. Hoon stood 20 feet away in the center of the ballroom she had spent the last hour returning to perfect condition, and he was looking at her with an expression she could not immediately read. She had spent 14 months in this building developing a working vocabulary for his expressions. She saw him at a distance, in the lobby and the corridors, the way you saw weather through a window. She had read him as controlled, contained, the kind of person who made rooms behave by entering them. Up close, the expression was harder to parse. He was trying to figure her out. She recognized it because she had been figured out before, the particular quality of someone encountering a thing that didn't match its category and recalibrating. It was not comfortable to be recalibrated, in her experience. It produced unpredictable results. She stood up, set the stripping tool against the baseboard. Waited. I understand you found the envelope this morning, he said. Yes, and left it. Yes. He looked at her for a moment. Why? She had thought about this in the way she thought about everything, thoroughly, from multiple angles, arriving at the version of the truth that was complete without being more than the situation required. Because I don't know what it was for, she said. And I don't take things I don't understand. His expression shifted. Not much, a fraction. You understood what it was for. I understood what you intended it for. I don't know what I would be agreeing to by taking it. The ballroom was very quiet. Morning light on marble floors, the particular quality of an expensive room before it became what it was built to be. He had his hands in the pockets of a suit that had been tailored with the specificity that communicated a man who had decided, at some point, that he was done allowing the off-the-rack world to accommodate him. It was a bonus, he said. For discretion. I'm aware. The amount reflects thee. I know what the amount reflects. She held his gaze. The amount is the part I understand. The terms are the part I don't. He went still. Not tense, she catalogued the difference the way she catalogued everything in rooms where the power differential was significant. Not threatened. Stilled. The way things went still when they encountered something unexpected and decided to slow down and look at it properly. The terms, he repeated. Taking that envelope means agreeing to something. I don't sign agreements without reading them. She looked at him steadily. What am I agreeing to? The silence stretched for 4 full seconds. She did not fill it. She had learned, in rooms like this and rooms nothing like this, that the person who filled the silence had already conceded something. That what you saw, he said, carefully, and what your crew facilitated, stays in this building. That was already true, she said. I told my crew nothing. I will continue to tell my crew nothing. I have told no one anything. A pause. I would have done that without the envelope. I run a professional operation. Something crossed his face that she had not expected to see there. It was not offense. It was not calculation. It was something closer to the expression of a man who had just heard something said simply that he had been hearing said in complicated ways for a long time. Then why not take it, he said. Because I'm not for sale. She said it without heat, without apology, as a plain statement of fact. I did my job. I did it well. I'll do it well again next time. That's the transaction. The envelope changes what the transaction is. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "What do you want instead?" She blinked. It was, she realized, the correct question. The question that acknowledged what she had said without arguing with it, and she had not expected him to ask it. She had expected defense, dismissal, the particular form of confusion that powerful men produced when something didn't perform as purchased, which occasionally expressed itself as anger. She had not expected him to go still and quiet and ask her what she wanted as though her answer was information worth having. "I want the same thing I've always wanted," she said, "which is not relevant to this conversation. Make it relevant." The ballroom. The morning light. His eyes on her face with the full weight of his attention, which she was discovering was a different thing entirely from the attention of other people, not louder but denser, as though he was actually using all of it. "I have a degree in hotel and hospitality management," she said. "I have 14 months of experience running the overnight operations of one of the best maintained properties in this city. I have been applying for management positions for 2 years and have not received a single substantive interview because the credential is from the wrong place and the person presenting it looks like me." She kept her voice even. Even was not small. She had decided that a long time ago. "I want to do the work I trained to do, in a room where someone will let me do it." He was very still. "That is what I want," she said. "It is not yours to give, and it is not what you are offering, and so the envelope and I have nothing to say to each other." She picked up the stripping tool, turned back to the northeast corner. Behind her, she heard him exhale once. A controlled exhale. The kind of exhale that contained something being decided. She kept working. He came back the next morning. She was in the East Ballroom at 6 a.m. Her crew gone, the floor finished. The kind of early quiet that the hotel only had between 5 and 7 a.m., when the night had ended and the day had not yet remembered it was supposed to arrive. She had coffee in a thermos from the break room and the facility assessment she'd been annotating for Park, which she did every quarter because it was useful and because no one had told her to stop. He sat down. She looked at him across the small table she'd set up near the service entrance. Her table, her coffee, her annotated assessment forms. He was in a different suit than yesterday, which meant he had gone home at some point in between, which meant he had chosen to come back here at 6 a.m. in a suit, and she filed that information carefully. He set a folder on the table. "Operations manager," he said. "Daytime shift. Full staff authority over 3 floors of event and hospitality operations." He pushed the folder toward her. "This is what the position entails. The compensation is on the last page." She looked at the folder, did not open it, looked at him. "This isn't how hiring works," she said. "No, I should apply, interview. There should be a process. There is a process. I own it. I'm adjusting it." His voice was level, but there was something beneath it, not defensiveness, something more honest than that. "You were right yesterday. Your credential and your work should have already gotten you into a room like this. The fact that it didn't is a failure of the rooms, not of the credential." A pause. "I have rooms. I'm opening one." She looked at him for a long moment, long enough to read the thing beneath the level voice, the thing she had not expected from a man with his architecture, which was that this was costing him something. Not money, not the position, something else. The specific cost of a man who had operated in a world where everything was a transaction, saying plainly to someone who had refused a transaction, I hear you, and I was wrong, and here is the correction. She opened the folder. Read the position description with the thoroughness she gave to everything she read, fully, not skimming the actual terms, because she did not sign things she had not read. The scope was real. The authority was real. The compensation on the last page made her stop for precisely 3 seconds before she continued. She closed the folder. I have conditions, she said. Tell me. My crew, 3 of them have been here longer than I have and are overqualified for what they're doing. If I take this position, I want a formal review of their classifications within 60 days. He nodded once. Done the assessment. She tapped her annotated forms. I've been writing these for Park every quarter, and no one has acted on them. I want them in front of whoever makes capital decisions. You can present them yourself. I'll schedule it. She looked at him. You're not going to negotiate. No, why not? He held her gaze. The morning light was doing what it did at this hour, finding the gold in everything, making the ballroom look like a place where important things had always been decided. Because your conditions are reasonable, he said, and because I've spent 14 months with someone running half this building's overnight operations without knowing her name. Negotiating with you at this point would be absurd. She felt the warmth move through her before she could categorize it. Not the dangerous kind, or perhaps the dangerous kind. She was not yet prepared to settle that question. The kind that came from being seen clearly by someone who had the option of not looking. One more condition, she said. Tell me. The envelope. She looked at him steadily. Give it to the crew. Split equally. They earned it too. The expression on his face was, she held it in her mind and turned it carefully. Not surprised. Something quieter than surprised. The expression of a man who had been handed something he had not realized he was missing. He picked up his phone. Made a call. Spoke 4 sentences in Korean. Set it down. Done, he said. She picked up her coffee. Drank it. The ballroom was warm with morning light. The floor she had spent an hour on yesterday gleaming in the northeast corner, where she had fixed the wax pattern that had been bothering her since Tuesday. Small and significant, the way all things she cared about were. I'll need 2 weeks' notice on my current contract, she said. I'll have legal handle the transition. I'd like to handle it myself. Carolyn trained me. I want to train my replacement properly. He was quiet for a moment. 2 weeks, he said. As though he was agreeing to something that cost him personally and had decided the cost was worth it. She looked at him across the small table in the middle of the ballroom at 6 a.m. His ballroom, her coffee, the annotated assessment that had been waiting 2 years for someone to put in front of the right room. He had not offered her the position as a gift. He had not offered it as a corrected transaction. He had offered it the way she had asked to be treated from the beginning, as a matter of plain acknowledgement. You are what you are. This room should have been open to you already. Here is the door. She had walked through enough closed doors to know what an open one felt like. I'll need a proper onboarding, she said. I don't start jobs half-informed. You'll have everything you need. I'll have questions. I'll answer them. She set down her coffee cup. Looked at him one more time with the full weight of her assessment, which was the thing she had been doing since the moment he'd spoken her name in the ballroom yesterday, and which he appeared to have understood was happening and had chosen not to deflect. He met it, held it, did not look away. Then I'll start in 2 weeks, she said. He stood. Picked up nothing. He'd come with only himself and the folder. She noted, which meant he'd been prepared to leave the folder and absorb the refusal, and he had not assumed the outcome. She filed that. She filed it in a place that was not the professional assessment column and did not examine what it was doing there. "Miss Adeyemi," he said at the door. She looked up. "Your assessment forms." He nodded at the annotated stack beside her coffee. "Bring them on your first day." She looked at the forms she had been writing every quarter for 14 months for a man who had, until yesterday, not known her name. The forms that laid out, in clear-eyed detail, every inefficiency and opportunity and small correctable failure in the operation she had been running from overnight without authority to change anything above her pay grade. "I'll have a presentation ready," she said. Something crossed his face. Not the ghost of a smile. Not the architecture of one. The real one. Brief, unguarded, arrived and gone before it fully formed. But she had it. She would not pretend she didn't. She started on a Monday. The first staff meeting she chaired ran 40 minutes. She had been in enough meetings to know that the ones that ran long did so because the person running them was performing rather than working, and she was not here to perform. 3 of her overnight crew received reclassifications on day 58 of the 60 she'd been promised. The assessment presentation to the Capital Committee ran 90 minutes and produced a facilities investment decision that Park So-hyun told her, quietly, in the corridor afterward, had been needed for 4 years. She did not see Oh Ji-hoon often in those first weeks. He was in the parts of the building she was not yet in, and she was in the parts of the building she had been given, and the hotel was large enough that their paths crossed 2-3 times a week at the edges of corridors and in the margins of briefings. But she felt his attention in the way she had felt it since the ballroom, not intrusive, not surveillance. The specific attention of someone who had decided she was worth tracking and had chosen to do it honestly. He came to the Capital Committee presentation. He did not sit at the table. He stood at the back of the room, where senior leadership sometimes stood when they wanted to observe without participating. She had registered him when she came in, noted him, filed him, kept going, and she had run the presentation with the fluency of someone who had been preparing it in various forms for 14 months and finally had a room that would hear it. At the end, when the committee asked questions, he did not speak. But when the room cleared and she was gathering her materials, he was still there. "The North Wing Water Management Analysis," he said. "Slide 9. What about it? You've been watching it for how long?" "Since month 4. She collected the last of the slides. "It's in the quarterly reports." He was quiet for a moment. "I'll read them," he said, "from the beginning." She looked at him. "There are 14 of them." "I know." She held his gaze and did not fill the silence that followed, the way she had not filled the silence in the ballroom 2 weeks ago. He had 14 quarterly reports to read, 14 months of a woman doing work in the dark that no one in a decision-making position had looked at. "I want your read on the East Wing renovation proposal," he said. "Before we go to the contractors, that's not in my current scope. I'm expanding your scope. Level certain, not a question." She thought about the version of herself that had applied for rooms like this and been told, in the language of form letters, that she did not fit what they were looking for. She thought about the envelope, which had been split among her crew and which she had never once regretted not taking. She thought about what it meant to be in a room, not because someone had purchased your silence, but because someone had looked at the work and said, "This is what the work actually is, and you are what it actually requires." "Send me the proposal," she said. He nodded once. She walked out of the conference room and down the corridor with her presentation materials under her arm, and the morning light coming through the tall Chongwon windows the way it always did, finding the gold in everything, making the building look like what it was when you looked at it from the right angle, a place where things of consequence were decided by people who had earned the right to be in the room. She had earned it. She had always earned it. She was done being the only one who knew. Some things can't be bought, not because they don't have value, but because they have too much of it. The woman who understood that held herself exactly the right way, in exactly the right room, and waited for the door to open, not because she was patient, but because she knew what the work was worth. He had tried to pay her. She had shown him what she was worth instead. Those were not the same thing. He understood the difference now. And the understanding had cost him something real, which was, she had decided, exactly as it should be. He didn't come to her. He opened a door and stepped back. She walked through it herself, with 14 months of work under her arm and nothing she owed anyone for the walking. That was the story. That was how it had to go. That's all for tonight, my still waters and low burning flames. If this one moved something in you, you know what to do. Like it, subscribe, and drop your city below. Every city in the comments is proof that this family keeps growing. Next time, she corrected his translator in a boardroom full of men who didn't know she spoke the language, and what she changed in that translation saved his life. Come back for it.